What's up, y'all? Austin Winters here for episode number 10 of Winter's World, and today I want to talk about the concept of ancestral memories. So first, let's dive into phobias, and we'll see how these two things connect. So a lot of people have phobias, and a phobia is really just an irrational fear. So fear of heights, fear of the ocean, fear of different things, but some fears are somewhat rational. So if you have a fear of swimming pools and you almost died by drowning in a swimming pool as a child, I think everyone would understand where that person's coming from, and hopefully that person can get help from a therapist or a psychiatrist to talk out and work out that trauma they experienced as a kid and get over that fear of swimming pools or hopefully dampen it somewhat. But some fears just don't make any sense. What if you have that fear of water, swimming pools, the ocean, and you've never had a traumatic experience? You've never almost drowned. What if I told you that your grandparent experiencing an almost drowning situation could lead to you being afraid of swimming pools or the ocean? You'd probably think I was crazy. So let's jump into this study that was done at Emory University in 2013. The two scientists on the project were Brian Diaz and Carrie Ressler. What they did was they took lab mice, just typical regular lab mice, put them in a cage, and the cage had a floor that was metal, which was electrified. So they would spray a scent of cherry into the cage and then put a shock through that floor to condition these mice to be scared of the scent of cherry. After doing this a few times, just spraying that scent of cherry would have the mice visibly shaking. They would shudder in fear of that shock that they thought was coming, even if the shock wasn't delivered. So there was a clear fear in these mice. These mice then had children. These children grew up like how mice do, not being exposed to this cherry scent. But when they finally were exposed to this scent, all of them in the group that were descended from parents that were trained, conditioned to fear the scent, also visibly shuddered. When control mice who descended from parents who did not have that electrocution happen to them were fine. It just smelled like a scent. They didn't shudder. They didn't fear it. So that's pretty wild. But where it gets even crazier is that the grandchildren of the initial mice also had this reaction. They would shudder whenever the cherry scent was put in their cage. So that was not understandable for the scientists at the time. We don't have a concept for this, just like how you might have thought I was crazy if I told you you were afraid of the ocean because your grandparent had almost drowned in the ocean. So the explanation that is floating around right now is epigenetics. Epigenetics is basically genetics, a different form of genetics on top of the traditional form of genetics. So traditional genetics is mom and dad have a child, their DNA half and half gets combined to make the kid, and they're shareable traits. So if both your parents have brown eyes, most likely you're going to have brown eyes. If both your parents have brown hair, most likely you're going to have brown hair. So that gets passed down, and we understand how that works. Epigenetics works on top of this, and it's almost like switches on top of the code of DNA that are turned on and off by what happens in that living creature's life. So this extreme intense reaction that these mice had from being electrocuted switched something on top of their genome that was then passed down through at least 2 observed generations to make these mice sensitive to the smell of cherry, which evolutionarily makes a lot of sense. I mean, how many of our ancestors probably burnt themselves touching the fire or something resembling a stove, to where nowadays with us, you touch your hand on that stove for a second, you can see a child do it, they're going to rip their hand off before they even know what happened. It just becomes instinctual. So it's a defense mechanism that passes down. But my question would be, what if there's a positive side to this? What if we can learn from our ancestors' victories that can also be within you? Why would it just have to be phobia? So there might be ancestral memories locked within our DNA that we just don't know how to access yet, except for in fears. We know about this now thanks to this study. This study was very controversial, though. Some scientists, like at Columbia University, thought it was ridiculous and had no belief in the subject, but a lot of other scientists believed it. It's a radical paradigm shifting idea that we can get memories from our ancestors. So what do you think about this? Do you have any irrational fears that maybe you can ask grandma about? Maybe something happened to them whenever they were younger. It's a really cool, different way to look at your life and look at your ancestors who came before you. So I hope you learned something new, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.